So I just want to make it clear that there are no seminary classes to prepare us for what happened this week, all right? They never mentioned this as a possibility. They never mentioned that it was something that would take place, and it was just really bizarre, all right? But I do, please sign the posters. The people at the school, the people at daycare did an amazing job, and we really need to show them how much we love them and appreciate them. Okay, and we're going to be doing some other things for them as well this week. But please, if you can, take time to sign those posters. So I'm going to do the one thing that I know how to do, and that's talk about Jesus. Okay, so we're going to continue this journey about who is Jesus of Nazareth and what is he like. And so we began the process talking about the fact that he's God. We then talked about the fact that he was fully human. And then we talked about his mission last week. And today we're going to talk about how he models for us, how he showed us how to live and what that looks like and what that means. And so we're going to look at Matthew chapter 20 to see this story. Now, the background of this story is phenomenal, okay? So Jesus has just told these two incredible parables. And I mean, just about grace and how wonderful grace is. And then they're walking towards Jerusalem. Jesus and his followers, they're walking towards Jerusalem. And Jesus tells them for the third time, guys, we're going to Jerusalem and they're going to kill me. I'm going to die. Okay? So it's in that context, as they are walking to Jerusalem, that this story happens. And it's really kind of humorous. Matthew chapter 20, verse 20. So remember, they're walking to Jerusalem. He's just said that he's going to die and come back to life. Matthew 20, verse 20. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons and kneeling down asked a favor of him. What is it you want, he asked. She said, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you are asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Okay, I'm going to go through this story. Phenomenal stuff that's going on here. So in verse 20, we go back, and the mother of Zebedee's sons, right? This is the mother of James and John. Her name was Salome. Right? Now, Salome, you may or may not know, is the sister of Jesus' mom. Okay, so Salome is Jesus' aunt. Right? So that tells us that James and John are his cousins. Right? So they wanted to play that cousin role, and they wanted to play it up. And so what they did, now in Mark's version, just James and John come to Jesus, but Matthew says, no, it was their mother. And so what the scholars believe is that the brothers convinced the mom to go on their behalf. All right, and the reason they say that is because when Jesus responds, he didn't respond to Salome, he responded to the boys. Okay? So they tried to fool him, I guess. And anyway, so she comes and she kneels before her nephew and says, hey, I got a request. What do you want? I want one of my sons to sit on your right and one to sit on the left. Now, why would she ask that? In kingdoms in that day, the king would sit on a throne, and whoever was set on his right would be the next most powerful person in the kingdom, and whoever sat on his left would be the third most powerful person in the kingdom. And so she was saying, I want them to have this incredible position of authority when you establish your kingdom. Proud of my boys. And I'm going to cash in the ant chip right now. I want my boys to have a big place in this. And it may be because they asked me to do this, but I'm going to do it because I love my boys, and I'm happy for them, and they are following you, and I want them to have an important position in your kingdom. Okay? So she asked one son on the right and left. And Jesus said in verse 22, you don't really understand what you're asking me. And then he says something very interesting. He says, can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? And what Jesus was saying is, and the cup throughout Scripture, the cup of God is a cup of wrath. And so Jesus says, I'm going to pay a price, and I'm going to face God's wrath for the sin of the world. And he says, can you really bear the cup that I'm going to bear? And they responded as every man would, of course we can. We can do it. And I'm sure Jesus is chuckling inside, but he says, you in fact will. You will suffer. See, we know James, he was the first of the 12 to be killed. Stephen was the first martyr. James was the first of the 12. He was beheaded almost immediately after Stephen was killed. And then we know John was later exiled to the island of Patmos at the end of his life, where he did a lot of his writing. And so he said, yeah, you are going to suffer. But what you're asking me, I can't give you. It's not mine to give. Then he goes on to verse 24. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Basically, they were really mad. And I can just hear the conversation of the 10 saying, who do they think they are? We've been doing everything they've been doing. And they just think because they're related to him that they're going to have a special place. Well, I want to tell you what. I deserve a special place more than they do. I've worked just as hard as they have. I've been just as impressive as they are. And so they became angry and frustrated. And so Jesus, now let me say, these guys had this discussion a lot. They really struggled with it. They constantly had debates, they thought, where Jesus couldn't hear, about who was the greatest. And can't you just hear their arguments about why they're the greatest? They even had that argument the night after Jesus washed their feet. Totally missing the point. Now, please don't hear me condemn them, because I'd probably been right in the middle of them. Right? Been right there with them. And so I want to stop at this point, and I want to say this very clearly about our faith. You ready? This is not a competition. It's not a competition. You see, they had in their minds, if they were just good enough, if they did just enough good things, did enough of what Jesus said, if they were just faithful enough and they showed him how good they were, they would have a special spot in this kingdom that he was creating. You see, they thought he was creating the kind of kingdom they saw all around them. That Jesus would be king and he would be powerful and they would have positions of authority, and they were excited about that. And so they had this idea, well, I've got to outdo these other guys so that I can get the highest position. And they found themselves in this competition. They found themselves in this competition to be the best so that Jesus would pick them to sit at the right. But Jesus says, this is not a competition. And if it is a competition, you have it all backwards. You're doing it all wrong. And I think, so I think it's important for us in 2022 as followers of Jesus to hear this, because sometimes we get this wrong. It's not my job to be better at following Christ than you are. And it's not your job to be better at following Christ than I am. See, we kind of live the Christian faith with each other with this idea, like if the bear's chasing us, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. Now that's kind of how we do the Christian faith. And so we compare ourselves to others, and I'm following Christ, I'm doing what I can do, but as long as I can find somebody who's not doing it as well as I am, I'm okay. And if I just look around long enough, I can find somebody who's not as far down the road, and I can feel really good about myself. And then I come across somebody who's doing better, and I think, well, I'm not going to pay attention to them. I'm going to look a different direction. You see, the guys had it in their head that they're in this competition and they wanted to win. But Jesus is saying, stop. Stop. You're chasing the wrong prize. Now, let me stop and just confess to you, I understand wanting to be competitive. Right? I was competitive before I was born, and I've been competitive ever since. When I take personality tests, one of the things that's always about my personality is how competitive I am, right? And it doesn't matter if I'm playing a board game, a card game, or basketball, or a running race, whatever it is, I want to win. I'm just being honest, okay? Now, I will say, as I age, it becomes less and less important, and I become just as excited when I play a board game that I remember what game we're playing as I do winning it, okay? And so we just have this reality. I mean, I was raised in a family that we played dominoes a lot, and whoever won, the team that won, got to put the scorecard on the refrigerator until the next game. Then it got replaced, unless the same team kept winning, right? And so we wanted to win. You know, and I've told you before, one of the hardest things about being a dad for me was letting my kids win Candyland. I would adjust the cards so that they would win, and it killed me until age 5. Then they had to beat me on their own. But see, somehow we take this competition idea, and probably you're not as competitive as I am, but too many times we run the Christian faith race just thinking I've got to outdo somebody else. And that's what the guys were doing. We're saying, I just got to be better than Peter. I just got to be better than James or John or whoever it is. I just got to outdo them. And it's not about that at all. And Jesus is saying, you guys are missing the point completely. There's a better way. So he says, you're looking at the kingdoms of the world and seeing how they function. And so he says it more specifically this way. Verse 25, Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and the high officials exercise authority over them. He said, that's what you're looking at. You're seeing how the kingdoms of the world are set up, and you're seeing how people have different positions of authority and power, and you're trying to get those positions. You're missing the point. He goes on, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Two interesting words there. The word servant in the Greek is diakonos, where we get our word deacon. And so the idea behind deacon is a deacon is supposed to be a model servant for everybody else. Right? This is how you serve. This is what you're supposed to do. And so he says, if you really want to have significance in my kingdom, serve people. Serve people. Meet their needs. Find people who are hurting and help them. Find people who have needs that you can meet and meet those needs. That's how you become great in my kingdom, is serving. Well, that was a revolutionary concept. The guys would have thought, that's crazy. I don't want to serve people. I want to be in charge. And Jesus says, listen, if you want greatness in my kingdom, you serve. And then he said, if you want to be at the very top, if you want to be the most important, become like a slave. The word slave in Greek is doulos, which really means bondservant. So a bondservant was someone who was a slave because of a debt, and they were set free but chose to remain a slave and purposely put themselves below their master for the rest of their lives. And Jesus says, if you really want to be the top in my kingdom, put everybody above yourself. Everybody. Now, I just want to tell you, the guys were standing around, and I'm sure they were like, yuck. That doesn't sound like any fun. That doesn't sound like what I signed up for. You mean to serve? But then Jesus has the final blow in this last sentence. He says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And Jesus said, look, if there's anybody walking on this planet that deserves to be served, it's me. Remember we talked about a few weeks ago how he was God? And is God, and he came and lived in human form. And he was saying, listen, I'm coming as God in human form, living amongst the creation. And he could have said, you see that tree over there? I made it. See the lake over there? I made it. See the grass we're standing on? I made it. See the cloud in the sky? I made it. I did it. And if there's anybody walking on this planet right now, it's me who deserves to be served. But I have chosen in my kingdom to be a servant and not be served. Want to be great in my kingdom? Make everybody else more important than you. You want to be at the very top? Make yourself slave-like to others. Whew. That's quite the challenge, isn't it? But Jesus said, that's the way my kingdom's set up. I was driving the other day, and I was at a place where we were taking turns. There was one lane, and we were taking turns, and we were all waiting, and it was my turn, but the person coming the other direction decided to go ahead and go. And they were in a big truck, and so there really wasn't much I could do about it. And fortunately, that was one of those days that I'd had a good prayer time, and so I didn't say anything rude or do any rude gestures or anything. And so the person went by, and I was just like, oh, that was rude. But I drove on, and I began to have this, I don't know, this reality going inside of me. Something's not right, because I began to notice everything that was going on. People driving, and that was where this started. That's why I'm doing that first. But people would block intersections, even though the light was red. And people couldn't go the other way. People would be on the inside lane of I-10 and see, oh, that's my exit, and cut across 3 lanes of traffic in a very short distance. And I would be like, why would you do that? You're risking your life and the lives of other people. And so last week, getting ready for the hurricane, I go to the store, and all the water's gone. I think back to the pandemic and how long it took for there to be toilet paper on the shelves. So much so that we as a church bought toilet paper from Home Depot and gave it out so people could have some. And I began to process all of these things, and I thought about the time that Ladina and I were at the grocery store looking at the seafood counter. And we were probably that far away from the counter looking, and somebody came right in front of us. And it wasn't they were grabbing something, they were looking too. And I know I'm petite. And I'm easy to miss. But it's like, what are you doing? I didn't say anything, but I wanted to, but I did not. And I began to put all of these pieces to this puzzle together, and I was like, what is going on? And I realized this reality. A lot of people are very selfish. And not only are they selfish, they don't think about how their actions affect other people. Now, I think if we're honest, we all would say we have moments like that. Okay? But see, Jesus called us to something different. He called us to selflessness. To selflessness. So my kingdom's different. If you want to follow me, if you really want to take up your cross daily and follow me, find needs and meet them. Find needs and meet them. That's what he modeled. That's what he told us to do. That's how he lived. That's who we're supposed to be. So I was reminded this week of the story of Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa never set out to become famous. She set out to help people. She went to the poorest of the poor in our world in Calcutta. And if you're familiar with Hinduism, she served the Dalit, the untouchables. And in that culture, they are complete outcasts who have nothing. But she dedicated her life to serving those people. And so people had the opportunity to come and spend a month at a time with her and her group as they served and to help serve. And one time a lady had come to do that, and Mother Teresa was sitting in a room in the middle of a worship service, and this woman came and sat on the floor in front of her and just began telling her how wonderful she was. You're just so amazing. You sacrifice so much. You invest so much in these people that have so little. You're just, it is so incredible. And this woman went on and on and on about how great Mother Teresa was, and she finally had enough. Mother Teresa did. And she grabbed her by the cheeks, and she turned her face towards the wall where there was a picture of Jesus. And she said, "It's not me, it's him. It's him." I think we have to understand this reality, and several things that I want to point out, so what, about Jesus and his model for us. And the first one is, foremost, following Jesus is not about you, and it's not about me, and it's not even about us. It's about him. First, foremost, and period. It's about him and bringing him honor and glory. And we have to always keep that in mind, that the reason we do what we do, the reason we're signing cards today, the reason we're taking gifts to the school and to the daycare center, we want people to see Jesus' love. It's not that they'll be impressed with us. It's not that it's going to be a great thing for people to know. It's about letting people know Jesus loves you, and so do we. Period. And so we have to keep that in mind. The second thing that I want to point out to you is this. The world is in desperate, desperate need of seeing selflessness. And I hate to say it, but too many times, followers of Jesus are selfish too. And we need to stop. We need to stop. Our friends Jason and Kimberly McGibbon taught us, as we went up there so many times to Ontario to help them, that their motto was, see a need, meet a need. If you see a need, meet it. If you can meet it any way, you meet it. Make a difference in that person's life. Show them Christ's love. The world needs to see that. Desperately needs to see that. And so we need to make it a priority. And finally, and I want to say this because it's so many times we talk about this and it just ends up on a negative plane. But I want you to hear me. There are followers of Jesus all over this planet who serve and serve and serve and serve, and we'll never hear their names. They're not trying to have people hear their names. They're just serving because that's what they're called to do. And you know, it's good to be celebrated, but the truth is, what we want to do is celebrate our King with the lives that we live. So this morning, when we talk about Jesus and who he was and what he modeled for us being a servant. How would Jesus live my life if he were me? He'd find a way to serve. He would see those needs and he would meet them. I challenge you to make that part of your journey. Let's pray.